Hi, I'm Tim Horn. I'm here for breaking news today, and we have some fantastic interviews to do, and you're going to see them. We have some terrific kids. I'll say they're kids. They're younger people from overseas, multiple countries, all with a lot of experience that you and I in America just haven't had. A lot of it relates to socialism, which is going to be a topic for today. So my first guest is Maria Kapinos, and she is from Ukraine. How did I do in the pronunciation?
Very well.
Okay.
Amazing.
There we go. Now, Maria, we'll say her age because I want you to know, and it's not a bad thing. She's 25 years old. She's got a lot of experience under her belt and was recently put on a list of people who couldn't go into the military-controlled area in Ukraine, which she's proud of that, and she's going to tell us why. Maria, welcome to Breaking News. Thank you for being here. Having talked to you a little bit off camera, I find you to be obviously a very intelligent person and well-spoken. I think our viewers today are going to love hearing what you have to say. So why don't you talk about that relationship between Ukraine and Russia, because we're not as familiar with it as what we might be, and certainly not as much as you are.
Okay, just to start it, I'll say straightforward. We're in a state of war with Russia right now.
Right now.
Right now, and it started in 2014. As for our relationship with Russia before that, they weren't that bad because both Russians and Ukrainians, we are Slavic. I mean, like, kind of share the same blood. We were part of USSR for a long time. But still, Russia was kind of a shadow over Ukraine, and many decisions were made kind of in Russia, you know, and they were implemented in Ukraine.
So I just wanted to clarify. So you're saying that Ukraine was part of the USSR?
Of course,
right.
we're part of USSR.
From the beginning, right? From the beginning when it was founded, or did they come in later?
A few months later, but still we were Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. Those were three countries that formed USSR.
Yeah.
And actually we were told that we are kind of best of the best. And we were lied that our country is the most successful in the world. And why? Because we had no idea what it can be like in other places. So just like, for example, when people went abroad, when they came back to Ukraine, they would burst in tears because they understood that they were lied for so many years. So it's a very painful topic, actually.
Yeah, I would bet it is.
And I think when USSR broke apart, many people understood that they were living in this like fog of lies. That's how I would describe it.
You were saying that the people there in Ukraine didn't realize how bad it really was until they saw the other side. The news, I suppose, was much controlled, and you couldn't see a lot of what was going on in the rest of the world and how bad the situation was in Ukraine. Is that fair to say?
Fair to say. To make my point, I'll just give you an example. Okay. When foreigner managed to come to USSR, and believe me, it wasn't easy, you had to have lots of papers. But if a foreigner walking down the street decides to talk to a person, that person would very likely go to jail for talking to a foreigner. We were not allowed to talk to foreigners. If we saw them, we were supposed to report on them, because every person speaking English or any other language except for Russian would be like potentially perceived as a threat.
And this is the way you grew up?
Well, thankfully, I grew up 3 years after USSR broke apart, but you have to understand, because I was born 1994, but you have to understand that I was raised in the country, post-Soviet, post-communist country, with all the barriers implemented, with all the perceptions. For example, coming to the US for the first, it's my first time here. I remember on my first day in the US, I remember like a girl in the coffee shop just talking to me. And I remember thinking, what does she want from me? And I was like perceiving her as a threat, because that's what we've used to. And
meanwhile, she was just trying to be nice. And
that's the thing. We don't even smile that much. I think in our country, like, people smile less, and that's also part of the culture. It is not that bad, but just we're used to that. And for example, in the late 70s, my grandmother went to Czechoslovakia. When she came back, she wouldn't speak for a few days. She was very quiet.
Why?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So in this group, they were followed by KGB guys, and they were supposed to go to places, certain places, and not to kind of, go somewhere outside of the places they were supposed to. But still, my grandmother saw things that changed her perception of life. And when she came back, she said to my mother, I had no idea people can live like that. What she meant is, just believe me, Czechoslovakia wasn't a wealthy country. It was quite poor, you can say
But
that.
it was more free.
But not
No?
only free. It's not about freedom. It's about basic needs. For example, she said, when people want, they just can go to the restaurant. They do not save money for a year to go and celebrate.
Oh.
And when they need to buy new shoes, they do not have to bribe a saleswoman or just find some ways to get new shoes. They could go to the shop and buy it.
You know,
And
that's so
imagine-
foreign to us, thinking that
Yes.
you'd have to bribe somebody to get a
get
pair of
some shoe-
shoes. You'd go get a pair of shoes.
It is.
That's-
It's so different, and I have goosebumps every time I think about that. Imagine we look so similar, basically, you and me, like both humans. We both kind of speak the same language, but imagine there's a difference in backgrounds.
I can't. I can't
see?
even imagine it.
So many things that are taken for granted here, they kind of surprise me that much. And I have to tell you, like, I hate socialism. And when here in the US, I meet some people like in late 17, 18, like in their 20s, and they say that maybe socialism is not such a bad thing. And I'm like, listen, go to the country with socialism, live there for a year, then come back. If you don't change your mind, I'll give you like $1 million. I'll find this money. But I know that I wouldn't have to search for this money because you'll change your mind.
So your advice is don't be just taking on any socialist thoughts because you don't know socialism.
Just learn what it is
Learn what it is before you decide.
and see what people are like. Another example, my grandmother's sister, she had a husband, and this husband had relatives in Canada. They fled the country, fled to Canada after Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
And her husband received a letter from Canada.
And?
A few days later, he was invited to the police.
Because he got a letter from Canada, the police wanted to interview him.
And a few days later, he died.
He died.
And that's not something I...
Was he arrested? Or
No,
something?
he just died. No
He-
one knows what happened to him. He just did
How
not
old
come
was
back
he?
home. Like 30s. In his 30s.
Oh my
Absolutely
gosh.
healthy, happy, married man who wanted to have kids with his wife.
So, wow, those everyday experiences are something. Well, let me ask you about a couple of the larger ones, and that is today in Ukraine, is it more free than it was before when you were talking about these things when Russia was more in control? Or is it less, or did it revert back? Did it leave that and then go back to it? What's the status now?
I have to tell, there are many problems we face right now, but in the same time, I think we really we went through revolution to have this freedom. And I actually think that in comparison to many, like even Russia, I think we have much more freedom. Because, for example, I work in Kyiv Post, English language newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came there, it was I've been working there for 2 years. And on my first day there, my editor said, you can write whenever you want, whenever you think is right, as long as it's like the grammar is correct. And I did that. I wrote many nice pieces I'm proud of. And of course it's not like that everywhere, because the problem of our media is usually they are privately owned. And it's an interesting fact that Ukrainian television is one of the best in Europe. I think it's like on 3rd or 4th place. Imagine. Why? Because in Ukraine, television is like is a very good way to influence the voters.
Mm-hmm.
So we have like a very good channels and oligarchs that own those channels. They would kind of try to push their lines, of course. But I know that we all know, and it's like a very long topic to discuss, but we all know who's in charge of what. But in the same time, there are many journalists I am extremely proud of, and I have, for example, I have a friend who was stabbed 2 times on the street, and he
He was what, 2 times?
Stabbed. He was almost killed. He was attacked by people in masks. And we were born on the same day, so we kind of the same age, we have similar perception of life. And I asked him, are you scared? And he said to me, but like, if I'm not doing that, who will?
What was he doing wrong that these people would attack him?
For example, he's from Odessa, and mayor of Odessa is a person I deeply despise because he's a criminal, and he was trying to kind of change that. He was trying to show who this person is, and kind of.
So your friend was trying to expose who the
Yeah,
mayor of
he was
Odessa,
trying
the
to.
kind of his real character,
Yeah.
and he ends
And-
up getting attacked, and you think that's the reason why?
He knows the reason why, and actually everyone knows the reason why, but just this person is backed up by quite strong forces, mayor of Odessa city. So it means that at this point there is not that much that he can do. But still, no matter what, we were able. Let me explain it this way. I remember in 2014, I had the same life as you have. Laptop, good school, I've been traveling, I've been studying languages, and then the war. And I remember coming to the revolution started on the biggest street of Kiev, the capital. And I saw thousands of people screaming, trying to get this freedom. And you hear loud music and drums, and you think, God, it's happening in the center of Europe, because Ukraine is located actually in the center of Europe. And these people, we were so united. And I think, and not only me, that Russia is punishing us for this crave to have more freedom, more independence. Because a few days later, I remember me and my friends, and there were probably 100 of us sitting in front of the TV and just watching news, and we hear that Russian soldiers, they occupied Crimea. And it was like two worlds kind of mixed together. On one side, you understand that something you could not believe in is really happening. On the other side, you have nightclubs still working. You have you're planning your next trip to Italy, and you talk to your friends somewhere, I don't know, in Canada or in America, and it's hard to explain how impossible it felt. And a week later, our currency, Ukraine local currency, it kind of devaluated.
Yes.
And things I would buy every day without even thinking, they became 3 times more expensive in the same time. And I remember telling my mother, Mama, I don't know how to cope with it. I don't know what to do. And she said, my dear, the saddest part that we all been through this. And it was so surprising because people of my age, they were panicking. And while my relatives, they said, we've been through this. And they were reacting like it's not the worst thing that could happen. And then I remember first news that Ukrainian soldiers are being killed. And, I'm going to tell you one thing that is very scary, but I know that this is true. You can get used to everything. You can even get used to the fact that I have a very good friend killed. I had a very good friend killed. And this guy, he studied actually in Oxford, can you imagine? And he came back to Ukraine because he wanted to be like a nationalist. He wanted to show.
Yeah.
And he went there, he died. His parents, they are scared like hell, and they couldn't believe that it could possibly happen. And my biggest worry is here in America.
Why so?
Here in America, I mean, people think that something like that could never happen here on their territory.
But you know it can.
But I know everything can happen. If you're not protecting your territory, if you not teach next generations how fragile the society can be.
You are a woman with knowledge far beyond your age.
Thank
I got to tell you, thank you so much for being with us today. And for our viewers, what you see right here in Maria is the truth, not what somebody wants you to hear. This is the truth. Maria, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.